Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week we start our Cerebral Nightmares Festival with 1991 Coen Brothers movie, Barton Fink.
Let's dive on in.
Coens.
Yes. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Poulter.
And if you like what you see / hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media.
Spaces and places. My
Both.
favorite.
Yes.
My favorite.
Indeed.
All right. Let's get into the Cerebral Nightmares Festival. We wanted to do something a little spookier for the October month.
Yes.
And you thought of this one. Give us a little info on why you picked this festival and what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that what I was thinking of is just I started thinking about these movies, and it kind of goes back to that episode that we did in looking at isolation horror that we did with Holy Mountain. If you haven't seen that episode, you can check it out in our feed below. But and one, I had sort of talked about one version of isolation horror being when you are isolated as the main protagonist because you don't know what's happening to your mind, and that your mind might be playing tricks on you, and that could be for a myriad of different reasons. That could be because of something that's actually haunting you, or that could be because of mental illness or stress or anxiety or panic or any of those other things. And I think most of the movies that we'll be doing in this festival sort of ride that line. Sometimes these monsters could be something that are real, or they really could just be things that are within our protagonist's mind. And that is a certain kind of scary, which is why I thought cerebral nightmare was such a great term, that even if there is an outside influence that's attacking you, there is that moment in between where you're like, well, is there a history of schizophrenia in my family? Right? Like, which a lot of times is not what happens in haunted house movies or some of these monster movies. We don't have characters try to find that out first. And so I always think that's interesting. But I didn't want to do straight horror. And so that's why we have kind of a mix of things happening in this festival. And Barton Fink just made so much sense as one of those that fits. It's probably the closest that the Coens have ever done to a horror movie. And
That's funny,
right?
Yeah.
Even though they always do genre bending stuff every time. You think about Big Lebowski. It's like, oh, we'll do a stoner comedy that's also a Raymond Chandler noir detective film, right? And you go, they're always embedding these things together. Yep. And so this one, in interviews, the Coens have described it as being a historical literary piece mixed with a buddy comedy, mixed with a horror film. Which I was like, sure, yeah, that has that vibe to it, right?
Yeah, let's get into just the Coens for a minute. Those who are just joining us or haven't been listening to the podcast for the past 13 years, the Coens are kings in our neighborhood. I think definitely. For the most part, we absolutely love most everything they've done. Not everything, but the stuff that's. We say this all the time.
Are we just putting the Lady Killers is floating across the lower thirds?
I don't mind that one. I know everyone hates that one. It's not that bad. Tom Hanks and the Coens. Come on,
it's okay.
That's easily not their worst movie. I know everyone says it is, but I think there's worse.
Okay,
but regardless. They're filmmakers that we feel are generational. I guess I'm speaking for you a little bit here, but
do it. But speak for me.
This movie it really is kind of a lot of the best of what the Coens are good at.
Yes.
Mixed together. This was a movie they wrote when they had writer's block for Miller's Crossing, which came out right before this, and then this came out, I believe, at Hudsucker Proxy came out after this, so it's kind of in between those two movies in the filmography. So it's still pretty young in their career. They haven't done Fargo yet, or any of the ones that really made them a big deal. But this was the first movie ever to win all three major awards at the Cannes Film Festival, with the Palme d'Or, Best Director and Best Actor for Totoro, which has never happened until 1991.
You know what's funny about that too? You mentioned the Hudsucker Proxy, and it almost feels like that the Hudsucker Proxy, a lot of the humor that is not outward humor. This is one of the things that's very interesting about the Coens, is that they're kind of some of the only media makers, filmmakers out there that I can think of that have certain things that when you watch their films, you're like, that's really funny to them, right? And it might be funny to you as a viewer, but you know that it's funny to them. And the My Girl Friday, fast talking, you see, because da ba da da do do do, like that is something that's very funny to them. And obviously they interjected that hugely here in Barton Fink. And then there was echoes and residuals of it left over for Hudsucker Proxy, because it takes place in a similar time with people using the same weird, stilted 1940s talking like this. See, like that Tony Shalhoub does such a great job of here in Barton Fink.
It's really hard to pinpoint their sense of humor. Although it's very much my sense of humor as well, and that's why I enjoy their movies so much, because I think what they're also talking about is funny. Like, I think Fargo is a legitimately hilarious movie. Oh, yeah. And part of it is because they talk funny. Yeah. And a lot of the things are these weird details and intricacies that you get with just their characters. And it's not something it's not really about what their character's saying or doing as much as how they're saying or doing it, right?
I mean, my God, Steve Buscemi saying, what the hell are you doing, Shep? I was banging that broad, is still one of the funniest lines. Like, that is so funny to me from Fargo. And you just go, that had to be one of those things that when they wrote that, they probably were just like rolling their eyes, being like, and they probably weren't even laughing. They were probably just saying to each other, that's funny. That's really funny. That's funny.
I would love to see kind of behind the scenes their process of working with actors and how much rehearsal goes into it, how much discussion around how silly or stupid they should inflect this word or that word. Pretty interesting.
Most of the main characters here were written for these actors too. So when you think about how they work with these actors, right?
Mm-hmm. I can completely see it. The Jack Lipnick character is so perfect for Michael Lerner. Totoro, I mean, he looks like he's a racer head in this movie.
Oh, completely.
Kind of. And then you got John Goodman, Judy Davis as Audrey, John Mahoney again, who we did last week in Primal Fear.
This is a whole Frasier themed session that we're doing here, you guys.
That's right, Frasier Fest. Tony Shalhoub, that you mentioned already, who is just goddamn outstanding. I wish he was in more stuff. Agreed. John Polito, who plays Lou, and Steve Buscemi. Almost all of these are Coen regulars. Yes. I think pretty much, except for Judy Davis. I don't know if I ever saw her in anything again. But we start off with the credits on the wallpaper, which is wonderful and comes back to everything. And then we kind of pan down into this play, and he is this playwright who is, just starting to hit it big time in New York City. He's an intellectual guy. He what does he say? He writes for the common man. We'll get into that stuff, but he kind of gets coerced into developing screenplays and moving out to Hollywood, and his agent's pushing him that way, and kind of he's a success, but he's a writer who writes from the gut, right? And it's just so marvelous and charming. And he's the next big thing.
There's this whole attitude about obviously the act of writing is a huge piece of this, but sure. So is this concept of like,
it's not even the act of writing, it's the getting to that place where you can go, like, yes. And you have something, right? It's not even,
but it's, yeah. But yeah, I guess it's the in between of the act of writing. But I think
it's the artist's mind, right? It's the artist's mind, the already paranoid. He's on the brink of success, but not measured success. And,
so let me ask you. Let me ask you
wants
this: the Coens are the Coens at time can be cynical, but I don't think they've ever been this cynical. This feels like such an inward point of view look at themselves as writers, and that writers are phonies, right? Like the writers are making shit up. They're never actually listening to who they say is their main muse, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you're right. This is more about the in between than the act of writing. But I think one of the things that's really interesting about that too is that what we see is this wrestle of the idea of selling out with a character who claims to be, this writer of the people, when really Barton Fink is a shitty writer. He's not a good writer. He writes this one play, and we later find out that the main characters of that play are named after his mom, his dad, and his uncle. And then when he actually finally gets through his writer's block in the last act of this movie, what he starts writing is basically just a rehash of the play that got him famous to begin with. He can't stop talking about fishmongers. He can't stop having parents talking about their son and saying, that kid out there, he will never hear from him again other than getting a postcard. Like he is a Fink. He is a total wannabe.
I mean, I agree with that to a point, but I wouldn't put it all on him. I think if you look at every character in this movie, from John Mahoney to Charlie to the cops, everyone's a fraud in this movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's not just him. It's everyone. If you look at all of the characters, John Mahoney's the biggest one. He's this William Faulkner type of drunken guy who can't even keep words, and we find out later that Audrey had been writing his books the whole time. John Goodman's not who he says he is. The cops aren't good at what they do and questioning him, which is the great scenes for sure. But even Chet's bad at his job.
So that's really yeah, no kidding. So the cynicism runs that deep. That everyone here is a phony. I like that a lot. Well, and it makes you, I obviously probably the largest. There's massive symbolism all over in this movie, but I would say the disgusting oily wallpaper falling off the walls is probably the biggest one. And obviously, you can take that as being the veneer, the thin veneer of what things should be is melting literally off the walls. In this hellish landscape that Fink finds himself in, right?
Yeah.
Which is exactly that phoniness, right? All the way down.
I love when his agent is, he keeps talking about, he's creation for the common man, and he wants to change people's lives, and they have stories just as much as kings and princesses, all this stuff. And his agent's basically like, the common man will be here when you get back. Just
totally.
Go ahead and make some money. I'm like, oh, that's such a good line.
It's such a good line.
So he arrives into California with the ocean waves kind of introducing him into this hotel. We go right into the hotel. Earl. This is supposed to be 1941, so kind of the beginning of the big pictures, right? And he gets a job with Capitol Pictures. And is set to write a wrestling movie. And we immediately go into the hotel, into this hellish landscape. And we get Chet, and just the little things, like you said a few minutes ago, the symbolism in this movie is everywhere if you pay attention to it. I've already mentioned a few things that we'll get to that are already symbolic. So have you. And, he rings the bell, and the bell just rings for like this extra 30-40 seconds in the movie until Chet comes upstairs.
Unsettling. It's so unsettling.
But it's also perfect because just the Coens, like the just the little details, and where he has to stop the ringing with like the pause of his finger. Bink. Hilarious and beautiful. Just I don't know. Buscemi's so good here. This is actually the only movie they don't kill him in.
I heard that, which makes perfect sense. Although
But
he
always-
might be dead. I mean, at the end
Yeah,
of
that's
this
true.
thing
Who
when the
knows?
whole
Yeah.
hotel's on fire, he's probably dead.
Always amazing detail that you're not really expecting, right? Like the sinking bed. Like it's just this little detail that his, thing comes in. But it's also just like, and then of course the fading wallpaper is the big one here. But I don't know, even the way his hair's cut and with his little circular glasses, like all those little things end up meaning something, or they add to the personality or the personality type of that character that you can kind of relate to or not relate to at all.
Well, it's funny too because the Coens said that when they finished this and released it, people kept referencing Kafka short stories, right? And that this was a very Kafka-esque paranoid delusion.
Sure, I could see that
completely. And and it's funny because they said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we both read, I think, The Trial and Metamorphosis when we were in college, but like, I haven't gone near his stuff now, but like, now I'm gonna have to read some of it." And so it's like a lot of times I feel like that they telegraph in these massive ways things that are on people's minds, feelings that are evoked. Make people react very, very strongly. And sometimes they just see it and intuitively go, that's going to be good. But they don't necessarily go to all the levels that can sometimes crop up in someone's impact that they feel when they watch it. And I think the fact that they didn't even have Franz Kafka on their mind when they made this is sort of miraculous to me because it's so in tune with so much of Kafka's writing. Just the paranoia and the sense of like, why am I here? And is even my wallpaper conspiring against me? Like all those things are like, that is like tried and true Kafka-esque, like to its core. And yet it wasn't even on their mind. And I just think like that in and of itself is brilliant and goes to show that like,
but it also shows the influence of someone like Kafka in other things they've probably seen, right?
In other things they've probably seen, and just pop culture in general.
Sure.
Movies in general, but I just think it goes to show that there's a psychological fog that they put into their movies of the way things should look and feel, the way that characters should speak to one another, that just goes way beyond, right?
I can't explain it. I really can't. And I feel like we've had this conversation before, but I truly can't pinpoint the one thing that makes them great. I can point at 50 different things, like just the whole idea of the bell ringing too long, like just them knowing that I need to use the aspect of sound here just to tease with them a little bit, make them feel a little uneasy, but also have it be funny as well. Just being able to do that stuff. Let's get into the wrestling picture and Jack Lipnick, the Hollywood exec here. He's in the same office that they used in The Player.
That's
I don't know
right.
if you recognize that.
I read that, and when I read it, I was like, that makes perfect sense.
It has to be the one in Roger Rabbit too, right? Because I feel like it looks exactly the same as
definitely.
that one.
So
it's
Michael
a
Lerner,
recognizable, yeah.
Well, and Michael Lerner in a Coen film, always a treat.
Always good. Amazing.
But
he's a great ass kisser here. He's like, Hollywood's not a bad word. Writers are kings.
And he's like, I'm the biggest kike you'll meet here. That doesn't mean I'm saying my dick's bigger than yours, but maybe you know that. You're the writer, right? This insanity. And he obviously is playing this amalgam of like Louis B. Mayer, Jack Warner. Like it's just they've created this character that's supposed to be all of these different versions of a studio exec in the 1940s. Now it does take an even weirder turn towards the end where suddenly he's dressed up as a general and it just gets so strange. And you're great. Like, and in those moments you're like, is everything here make believe? Like, is he even real? Is everything a figment of Barton's imagination?
He's completely real. But
real. You know what I'm saying? It's like the lunacy level gets to a Harold and Maude height.
I loved it. I love when I know you're jumping to the end, but I love when he's in the Colonel outfit. He's like he's acting.
Wardrobe
like
had this worked out for me. Yeah. You're just like,
amazing.
What is going on?
It just adds to his craziness. Right?
Now I want
to wildness.
Here's a little sidecar for you. So did Darren Aronofsky take the Barton Fink challenge? Is that what The Wrestler was all about? Was he like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to make
totally
a
funny.
wrestler picture about the common man. I'm going to make the Burly Man movie.
That's so funny. I totally thought of that, and I was trying to think of like, because they talk about wrestling pictures in the 40s were just like a western in the 60s
it was like a
or something.
thing you did, yeah.
And so I was just like, what wrestling movies are there? There's like 2,
Yeah.
maybe, and The Wrestler's one of them.
Yeah.
And I definitely thought of that, but like, yeah, it's maybe it was past our time or something.
Maybe, but I
or
love
before
that.
our time.
There's possibly a tie-in there where I'm like, you know, maybe Aronofsky like saw this movie when he was younger and was like, someday I'm going to do that. I'm going to make the movie that Barton couldn't make, right? And he did.
I would
So
love to
kudos
ask
to
him
you.
that. Yeah, I would love to ask him that. I love this hallway that we get in the hotel, the 6th floor. We got this like just kind of grimy Vegas-looking carpet and green wallpaper, and then everyone has their shoes outside the doors.
So spooky.
Every door has it, but you never see another person except when you hear a man crying or laughing. We don't really know in this scene where John Goodman gets complained on by Barton
and
here.
It's scary where you can hear through the walls, and then the phone rings because Chet calls
you can
him.
hear
He's
everything.
like, "What?" You know, and this
It's
is
a
one of
great
the things,
setup.
and it's the beginning of a movie-long issue, a movie-long problem that we see start here, which is when Goodman's character, when Charlie comes over and apologizes. First, you're like, "Is he going to beat him up? What the hell's going to happen?" And then he apologizes. He's like, "Oh, I feel like I feel like an ass. Like, least I can do is buy you a drink." Barton never asks him what's wrong. All that noise he was making over there, crying, laughing, whatever's going on, he never asks anything that's happening with Charlie.
Well, it's 'cause
Charlie's always there. He's always
even though Charlie is kind of his muse, like you said, he's a self-centered writer. It's more about him. He doesn't even listen, and he even says that near the end. You don't listen.
You don't listen. You don't listen. Well, and I mean, he says.
I wouldn't say it's a problem though.
Well, the problem, I guess, not a problem in the movie. I mean, the problem with Barton, this idea that he, when Charlie says, "Oh, I could tell you stories," and he's like, "That's what I'm talking about, Charlie." And then
but he doesn't ask him about a story. Yep.
Never asks him about a story, and what's interesting is it made me think,
like Barton, you're looking for a jumping off point here. Maybe listen to the guy that you're supposed to be representing. Yeah.
even when he finally reaches out to someone, it isn't Charlie, right? Even when he reaches out to someone for help to write his script, he still doesn't reach out to Charlie. And it made me think the very opening shot of this film after the wallpaper is this image of Barton with the script rolled up tight because he's so worried and he's hanging on every word of the actors. And all around him are blue collar, quote unquote, common men making sure that the ropes pull up the curtains, making sure that the sandbags are tied up, and they are moving around him left and right. And what's even interesting about that is in that opening scene, Coens are the Coens are these certain kinds of people where they don't make mistakes, right? They don't. It's like Kubrick. It's like if it's there, it was on purpose.
Sure.
And
I agree.
the last line that you hear,
not always, but most of the time. Yeah.
Yes, the last line that you hear of the actor at the very beginning that's on stage say, "We're gonna get a postcard from that kid," is John Turturro's voice.
Yeah, I knew that. Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's purposeful in the sense that Barton can't not live in his own head. The life of the mind that he's stuck in is his own. And he's imagining and he's making up that it's for the common man, and it can't ever leave his stereotype of what that common man must be, which is why he never questions why he never can go into Charlie's apartment, why he never questions why Charlie is always so nice and always there to help, right? Yeah. He can't see beyond that because he only understands the stereotype.
let's get into the Charlie Meadows character himself. He invites him in for a drink. He's, it takes a while to figure it out, but he's an insurance salesman and he sells peace of mind, right?
He sells peace of mind. Yeah.
And I just have to say, John Goodman has been so consistently excellent throughout his career.
Oh, yeah.
From Roseanne to whatever you want to pick. He's rarely Speed Racer, you name it.
King Ralph.
King Ralph. I mean, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. He's never been a better actor than he is with the Coens. They let him just go, right? They let him just go and get wild and crazy. Think about it in Raising Arizona or Oh Brother Where Art Thou?
Big Lebowski.
Of course. That's the obvious one. But I just love that they let him go and just go for it and be an actor, and they don't restrain him at all. At least it doesn't seem so.
Well, and you have to think, when this movie came out, what he was really known for the most part, was Roseanne. He was this lovable kind of schmuck, right? He was just like, he's just the guy. And so to be able to have him screaming with that shotgun in the crescendo of this film is something that, like, people just, like, had never seen him do before in that way.
I mean, he did it in Raising Arizona.
But not as scary as this. Even his Raising Arizona one is still a little bit lovable.
He still is a lovable schmuck here. I think that's the appeal. Like, I genuinely, like, through most of the movie, are like, Charlie's a good person. Like, he may be misunderstood. It made me think of Del from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles a bit. The John Candy character
but he's a serial killer.
I understand that, but we don't know that. But we don't know that at the time. But, like, him and Charlie actually, Charlie and Barton have a good, sweet brotherly relationship.
They bond. Although it always has an edge to it. It always has an uncomfortable edge to it, I think.
Sure. And I think
especially when he wrestles him.
Sure, but that's the setting that the Coens are putting him in. I genuinely he helps him out in a variety of ways here. He's the shoulder to lean on. Barton doesn't really have anybody. He's here by himself in Hollywood.
That's true.
And so like, I mean, he's supposed to be this brotherly, endearing figure. He may be obnoxious and annoying, a la John Candy in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but he's just a misunderstood person. Roseanne character is reflected here, but it's also the economy of the actor, right?
Yeah. You're able to have that twist because of that. And I think that maybe a lot of the stilted uncomfortableness that occurs is only upon rewatching, and the first time you're like, oh, this is part of just like the taxonomy of this strange movie. But upon rewatching it, you're like, oh no, he's a deeply uncomfortable character, even in his gregariousness, right? Like, he's gregarious and he's sweet and he's funny, but you're like, he's covering a thing when he does that, where he's like, oh, how about them lovebirds on the other side? And he's like, how can you hear that? And he's like, I guess I hear everything in this darn old building. And you're like,
yeah,
that should be more suspicious than it is. And if it wasn't for Barton being so lonely, he may also have noticed too. But again, it goes back to this
not listening. Yeah.
Not listening. And to the degree that, again, talking about the symbolic moments that hit us over the head, the moment where he stuffs his ears with cotton because the telephone won't stop ringing, I mean, is like, how much more do you need to see this is a character who's unwilling to look at the things around him to actually see what's happening?
But the symbolism there is that he said, I'm not going to go to a doctor. A doctor would trade my head in for a new one, which comes in.
Let's talk about the head talk.
Yep, there's a lot of it.
There is a lot of it. Take your head off. When there's head, there's a hope. If I had a second head, well, when this all comes together at the end, when this comes to a head, like that term is used like 50 times throughout this movie. And the first time you watch it, you'd never notice.
Yeah, I think Tony Shalhoub, as the director-producer guy here, says it like 3 times in a matter of minutes, and you're like, oh, okay, because he's on the phone, he's that fast-talking guy, all that stuff.
I'll have his head on a pike. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite line of his is, Bart needs some help. He's like, I need some kind of indication of what's expected here. I can't just like start going. Like, you need to tell me. And he's like, talk to another writer. Throw a rock in here and you'll hit one. And when you throw it hard.
Throw it hard. I love that.
So good. I love that. But it does lead into him meeting Bill Mayhew, John Mahoney's character, and here he's barfing in the bathroom, and it ends up being one of his favorite writers.
He has his little handkerchief down for his
little
knees.
hanky.
Yeah, God.
Well, he's been there before. I think he's thrown up in the toilet once or twice.
God.
That whole scene, and he kind of befriends him, and looks up to him, and goes and meets him, and later finds out what a horrible drunk he is. I mean, it's pretty obvious in that scene that he is, if he's puking and then pounding like a flask. And he's like,
God.
it's a little too early for me. But he falls a little bit for Audrey, who is kind of his wife, girlfriend, or whoever she is.
Yeah, Judy Davis's character.
Ghost Rider, whatever you want to call her.
God, isn't Judy Davis one of the strangest looking people?
Yes.
I love her so much because she's so odd. She just has like a strange vibe to her. And I think the first time I ever saw her was in Naked
Way
Lunch.
more than for sure. Way more than Charlie does, though. Like, she makes it seem more like a horror movie than anything, even though she's the nicest character in the movie. Right?
She is. She's kind of she is. She's the sweetest character and the most loving character in the movie, and of course that is to her detriment, as often happens in psychological horror movies, right?
Do you think, just to be meta here for a second, do you think the Coen Brothers got writer's block while writing this movie?
No, I think that
it was Miller's Crossing. I know, but
well, apparently they I don't know if you've heard this story. They both got writer's block writing Miller's Crossing, and they went and watched the Diane Keaton film Baby Boom in the theater. They watched that movie in the theater, and apparently it stoked a conversation between the two of them of like, could we ever make a movie like that? And then like this idea of like selling out to, and so like instead of a romantic, comedy about a pregnancy, they were like, a wrestler film in the 1940s. But they were basically like, what would happen if we? And then that turned into, and then they somehow melded that, they said, with The Shining, of a writer having writer's block in an abandoned hotel.
Sure. Okay.
While selling out. Right? Mm-hmm. And then everything blossomed from that. And they just said, we kept telling jokes that were making us laugh. And then 3 weeks later, we had a script.
Great.
So again,
the writing is amazing here.
It's this combination. So they, during that writer's block, to go and watch a movie like fucking Baby Boom, which I also have seen. You don't need to see it, dear listeners and fans,
unless you're a baby boomer.
I mean, still don't. But I love this idea that got them started in this conversation of like, what would it be like to be like singing for your supper and having to try and write something like this.
Well, I think it's encapsulated a bit here in the scene where he goes to Lipnick's house, and he wants him to pitch him the movie, and he essentially like doesn't have an answer, and is like, I don't like sharing my work in progress.
Yeah.
And you can see Lipnick just starting to boil over, and then he ends up firing Lou and kisses his feet.
Oh my God, it's the worst.
It's amazing.
Like, it could not be more dehumanizing. Like, could there be anything more nightmarish for Barton Fink though?
Well,
because a studio executive kissing his feet.
Well, yes, and it happens the scene before where he wakes up in his bed with Audrey, and she's basically decapitated, or not decapitated, but
she's bloody all over.
She's dead.
Bloody all over.
She's very, very dead.
Now, I love. There's a couple of directorial choices that happen in this movie that don't feel like the Coens, but feel like other directors we love. One I'm thinking of is this, we don't get a traditional he's gone to Hollywood scene. We don't get it at all. In fact, it's superimposed with a rock on the beach with water breaking against it. And we dissolve into it and we dissolve out of it. And I went, holy shit, that's David Lynch. Like, it feels so much like meditative David Lynch rather than the Coens. So that's one.
I would argue that some of Blood Simple is pretty David Lynch too.
That's a good point. That's a fair point. So that was
I don't
one.
know what inspired what, but the ocean is obviously a big theme in this, even though we never really get many places outside of the hotel room. There's a handful of places
till the very end.
The picture in the room of the woman on the beach is an escape to him. And that's his like only escape. But again, the ocean.
We hear it when he looks at the picture, right?
And we hear it. We hear the seagulls, all that stuff. So again, sound design with these guys, crazy.
So there's that, but then the second one, which I'm thinking of, and right around the same time, this is 91, I think, right around that exact same time, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, there are these moments where the camera is pushing into the actual hammers of the typewriter, or it's pushing into the drain. It pushes so deep into these things. And yes, the Coens have been known for things sort of like that. If you think about the camera moving up and down the ladders and Raising Arizona and some of these other things. But this is very different because it's so minuscule and small, and they've built models to move stuff inside of. And I was like, that does feel way more like Delicatessen, right? That feels way more like something with a flight of fancy, way more than it does a Coen Brothers film. And I was like, I'm really impressed with some of the weird aspects just with the cinematography that they did here.
But even just the little subtle things like him like still having writer's block, and he looks at the Gideon's Bible and pulls it out, and the only words of his script so far are at the beginning of the Bible.
At the beginning of the I love that. I love that.
Just a little thing, if you're not paying attention to it, awesome.
So can I I'm gonna go ahead and just do this now. I'm just gonna rip this Band-Aid off right now.
Rip it off.
Again, we talk about the knowing and unknowing pieces of what the Coens pepper into their movies, right?
Yeah.
And the two detectives, their names are Mastrion Teddy and then Deutsch. And they were named that. It is 1941 when this takes place. They're named that to represent the two Axis powers of World War II, Italy and Germany. To the point where they even say, Fink, what is that, Jewish? Yeah, I didn't think that they had regulations in this hotel, right? And then, and I'm skipping forward a little bit, but when Charlie shoots the second one of them, he says Heil Hitler. Right? So there is this entire secondary plot device people have talked about. December 7th, 1941. You combine this with the mosquito buzzing when Barton's trying to sleep, his fight with the soldiers in the USO, Lipnick chiding him at the end saying, don't you know there's a war going on? And this idea of a Jewish man in America believing in the common man and ignoring the travesty of things like the Holocaust because of his artistic pretension, and also even stuffing his ears to not listen and not see the things that are happening around him. And just to hit the nail on the head a little bit more, Carl Munt, Charlie Meadows' alter ego, it was also the name of a U.S. representative during that period of time in the 1940s, who became the vice chairman of the House on Un-American Activities Committee, where he was basically helped to get rid of a bunch of actors, screenwriters, directors, producers, and everything because they were communists. That's who Carl Munt was. So the name of this serial killer that Charlie Meadows actually is is the guy who was in charge of blacklisting all these people. So there's this whole undercurrent of politics. And apparently in interviews, the Coens were like, yeah, we just did that to fuck with people.
That's what I love about them.
I know. And I'm like, but you could watch the whole movie as an allegory. And they're like, nah, you don't have to do that. And I'm like, but you can.
It's like putting this is based on a true story in front of Fargo.
In front of Fargo. And it totally isn't. And it doesn't matter. It's an urban legend, and they did it anyway. I know. And it is so messed up because...
Geniuses.
Oh, my God. You could dig a rabbit hole, to the other side of the earth just based upon those little breadcrumbs that they threw down there that they were like, it's fine. It doesn't actually mean anything. But it's there. And here's the problem. You also, in those interviews, don't know if they might be fucking with you. They might be like, oh, there's a whole secondary plot device that we threw in there and thought about for weeks. But in an interview, we're going to be like, don't worry about that. Just watch the movie for it to be a movie.
Well, let's get to this final kind of revelation here in the hallway.
Yes.
Where
I'll show you the life of the mind. That's
right. Exactly. Look upon me.
Oh.
Probably one of their most classic scenes, I think, ever.
Yes.
It's up there anyways. And we get, I don't, this hallway, what would you say the hallway represents? Obviously it catches on fire. I think that we're in a hellscape.
I think the entire, what's the name of the hotel? The
Hotel Earl.
Mm-hmm. I think the entire hotel is Charlie. I think the whole hotel is actually Charlie personified because
Charlie's head.
Yes, because the only time that the wallpaper peels off all goopy is when Charlie's in the room or he's just left. He's either in the room or when he leaves.
Yeah, and he's the devil character in this, and Charlie's
it's pussy.
Charlie's the water.
It represents his pussy infected ear. Right? Like, I think that it is the common man persona that is idolized by Fink that is not real, that hides a murderous undertone to it. And that when it all lights on fire, it's Fink coming to grips with it. He has no idea what he's actually up against. And after it's all on fire and Charlie comes in and
stays on fire.
He comes in and he's yelling at him and he says, "You're a tourist here." And I think there's a duality meaning to that.
No doubt.
I think the first one is that Barton is a Fink. He isn't supposed to be there. He's a total tourist. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But the second part is that every writer is a tourist. Every writer is there, at the bus stop to finish their notes, and then they're going to take off. Charlie can't leave. He's a character. He's a character in this story. But Barton is transient. Barton is in a liminal space, and he's going to leave.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think the dualities are definitely there, no doubt. I mean, fire follows Charlie, right? The heat, that's why the wallpaper peels, is because, like you said, he's in the room or he just left the room. So his presence. I mean, at some point, he even says, he's back, it's hot in here.
Yep.
Barton does. And so you have that with the contrast of Charlie with as soon as he walks into the hotel room, there's the ocean waves, and when into the hotel, there's the ocean waves, and when he leaves, there's the ocean waves, and then when you look at the picture, there's the ocean waves. So it's fire versus water here.
Oh, okay,
right. Like that's the duality. I agree with you. I think the hotel is his head, or it's him in some way, and him trying to go to the lengths of being this artistic person who is a Fink, who is fake, and trying to pretend not to be that. And then he writes the script, which he thinks is the best thing he's ever written. And it probably is, because he went to these deep, dark places.
But it's not because we see in the very first line of his script, he says, in the background, we're in a New York tenement. In the background, we can hear the
Large
cries
man
of
in tights.
of the fishmongers, and you go, that's what his first play was about. And if you paid attention to when the detectives read the final line of his script, it's the exact same line as the final line of his play. We won't hear from that kid again unless it's through a postcard. It's the exact same fucking line.
I missed that.
He's
good
a total
grab there.
Fink. He's a total Fink.
Yeah, I mean, Lipnick definitely thinks his story stinks, but he just basically comes down to the fact he's like, I just wanted to give you something beautiful.
Yeah.
So who knows what happened? Who knows what's real? I think everything outside of the hotel is real. Everything inside of it is, I think there's some truth to the surroundings, but he's so into his craft that he has to take himself to these places, which, we've written movies before. Like it's not easy to just sit in a room and come up with shit. So
And then the problem is, or not the problem, but if you are okay. If you are if you are too smart for your own good, what you can do is take the thing that you're really good at and cannibalize it down to its essence until you look like an asshole, right? If you're so good at your craft, you will be able to step outside of yourself, watch yourself doing the thing that you're good at, and be like, what a dick, right? And that's what Barton Fink is it's these guys being able to step out. And so there's in fact, I have his book right here. Chris Ware, he's a graphic novel artist, for any of you guys who are interested or know about Chris Ware. Beautiful, amazing graphic novelist. But in that book I just held up called Rusty Brown, he puts himself into the book as Chris Ware, an art teacher in the 1970s, who's a fucking failed artist and is only a high school teacher because he's a pervert who likes to hit on teenage girls. Now, that's not him in real life. In real life, he is an incredibly successful, he does New Yorker covers. He's incredibly successful, right? Mm-hmm. But he's just like the Coens in that he's so good at what he does that he decided to parody himself in this book and made himself into a creepy high school art teacher in the 1970s who's a failed artist. And that's
Charlie Kaufman does it in an adaptation.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're too smart for their own good, where you're like, a guy like Spielberg would never do that. He'd be like, no, you know what? I'm totally comfortable.
He's fine with the common man. He's not fine with the self-referential man.
Yeah, he's like, I don't need to look at why maybe being a director is kind of a jag-off thing. I don't want to, I've been doing this for 50 years. I'm very happy with it. But it's when those guys can do that meta thing and step outside of themselves that it's it becomes some new weird compounded level of brilliance.
It becomes greatness. Yeah. It's greatness.
It really is. And obviously it's super postmodernism. I mean, I think Barton Fink is one of the early flags planted into 90s postmodernism. If this was the beginning of it, if Barton Fink was the beginning of 90s postmodernism, then Fight Club was the end, right? And so you have a pillar at either end, which is great.
This is something they showed in film school, and I started in the early 2000s going to school, and so this movie was not even 10 years old, and it was already being shown in film schools. These guys
that does not happen often.
Amazing movie, fun to revisit. This ending scene where we do get the picture in real life. You say the Kubrick thing where everything that's in there is in there for a reason. The seagull at the end diving into the water just happened.
I read that.
It was not on purpose, so pretty interesting.
Dude, that is Herzog level of brilliance. They had to have been like, are you fucking kidding? Of course that's the take. Come on. How does that happen?
Cut.
Because when I watched it, I was like, how do you do that? Is there a guy in a scuba diving suit under the water with a little fish?
Yeah.
How do you can't do that?
Awesome movie, awesome beginning
Yes.
to the festival so far. Next week we're going to do Angel Hearts
For Halloween.
That'll be our Halloween week episode. Very excited for that one. Really good fest so far, though. Super excited about this. Please like and subscribe. Go to all the places and spaces, Instagram, Facebook. You could email us. You could comment. Let us know what you think of Barton Fink. We love all the interaction. Please do it. Like and subscribe. We love you guys, and we will see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Did you see that your beloved Dune got pushed to 2021?
I did see that.
Sad day. I was very excited to see that.
They pushed that, and they put what else? There was something
James
else.
Bond.
Wasn't that there was another one that was like right around
Batman?
the corner? And Batman. That was it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they pushed them all.
What do you think of that trailer?
I love the addition of the Nirvana song. Did you see somebody? Somebody made the comment because there's like a, blink and you'll miss it spot of Colin Farrell as the Penguin. Have you seen this?
No.
And he's got all this. He's like he gained weight. They put prosthetics on him and all this. But honestly, who he just looks like is the comedic actor who plays the brother in A Serious Man. Why can I not think of that actor's name? He's kind of like he's sort of nebbish.
So you're saying he looks like an old Jewish guy?
Well, he looks exactly like that actor, and everybody was like, "Why did you have Colin Farrell put on all these prosthetics when you could have just hired him?" And like
Amazing.
It turned into a whole thing on Reddit where people were like, "That would have been like." Then I would have been like, "You got to see this." Because they got, and I can't think of the actor's name, but we'll put it up here. But like, it could have been him, and I was just like, "Oh my god, wouldn't that be amazing?" It's like a Tarantino kind of like, we're gonna reboot this dude's career, who's like 70 years old, like to be like this super scary villain in this new Batman movie.
Yeah, he was in Mad About You, right? That guy, Richard something.
Yeah,
gosh, I can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah, that guy.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yep.
Not scary at all.
Not scary at all, but like, I mean, who knows? Like, you could, like, it's called stunt casting, Pulcher. Stunt casting.
Was Tim Burton stunt casting with Danny DeVito?
Hell yeah! And look how good that turned out.
It did turn out good. I love that penguin.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's what it should be more than an old Jewish man.
Yeah, probably.
I am intrigued, especially if it's in the same world as the Joker that I love so much. So, and Robert Pattinson, I know he's got the Twilight shade on him a lot, but he's a hell of an actor. I've seen quite a few things since that he's pretty good.
I mean, you're young, It's like you do. It's like how Stallone did pornos before he got Rocky. Like you're just trying to keep the lights on, man.